Hello, welcome back to another episode of Hatchu with Us. We have a special guest here, Fraser from Canada.
Hello, Fraser.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for being here.
So we usually start always with like a word of the day. And our word is an Iraqi word, which I'm going to translate. And it's harami, which means a thief, a sly thief or someone who steals.
Sneakily, sneaky.
Like we always use that word in many different ways. Like, you know, if someone's sneaky, it's like, why are you being a harami?
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
Today's guest, he's chased many haramis in his time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Many. Sometimes I am one too myself. So it goes both ways. If I'm using that word.
An honest harami.
Exactly. Yeah. Takes one to catch one, they say.
Exactly. You got to think like one.
Right?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So Fraser's journey and identity. Okay. So you're a Canadian, originally from Vancouver, and now you're based in Dubai. What drew you into the world of policing, counterterrorism, and eventually Interpol?
Yeah. Happy to tell you. When I was a little kid, I grew up in I was born in Vancouver and then grew up a little bit sort of outside of Vancouver in a rural area. So it's like in the trees and stuff. And I would always like run around in the forest and pretend I was like an army guy or a police guy all the time. This was my thing.
Yeah.
And I wasn't sure which kind of path to pick. But in my neighborhood, I had a police officer who lived in the cul-de-sac where I lived. And she kind of inspired me. She said, hey, listen, if you do like 2 or 3 years of policing once you're done university, then you can go do like peacekeeping and international missions and stuff. And she made it sound super cool. So that kind of inspired me. So she was kind of my quasi-mentor in that capacity. So went to university, did some stuff, and then ended up doing policing. I thought I could do 2 or 3 years and then go international, but that was not the case. So in reality, I did like 7 or 8 years international or domestically, and then got some Interpol experience after that. I finally got enough experience to cross the threshold. So I've kind of always been interested in policing. I used to run around in the bushes with like camo on.
Playing cops, robbers as kids.
Yeah. And then if I saw like, the police cars fly by, I go, ooh, I want to know where they're going, right? So I thought instead of just being the fan, I should be the player, so exactly. I kind of went that direction a little bit. So it's always been in my wheelhouse, let's say.
Yes.
Yeah.
And now you're in Dubai. What made you leave Canada to come to Dubai?
Well, the last 3 years I was in Singapore and I was working with Interpol, and I would travel a lot. So if there was on a monthly basis, I would at least once a month travel internationally to do some work on the ground, either training, maybe an assessment of a criminal justice system or of a specific crime typology in a country, or actually help with investigations and run operations on the ground.
Singapore?
Based out of Singapore. Singapore is very advanced in the law enforcement realm, so they don't need my help. You know what I'm saying? Not many people do, to be fair. But
no, don't put yourself down like that.
But yeah, so I would travel to mostly developing context countries, so like Nepal, Bangladesh, Philippines, places like that, on their request. So they would say, hey, we're looking to do something, and I would go. So I was in Singapore for 3 years based, but really traveling around the world. So I was living out of a suitcase.
So when you travel around the world, Indonesia, all these places, I know you can't disclose everything.
Yeah,
what are some of the cases that, very briefly?
Oh, yeah. Just like any law enforcement person, like they'll usually do like general work and then specialize. So at Interpol, I specialized in sex crimes, so transnational sexual offenders, human trafficking, sex offenders that leverage the aid sector. So they join the aid sector to get access to vulnerable populations, if that makes sense, right? Because, if you're in a refugee camp and you're helping the kids, you get access to them, right? There's weird power dynamics that happen there, which is a very niche, narrow, esoteric crime theme. Like almost no one does work in that. It's not well studied. So Interpol was doing some work in that field, and I was assisting in that. So I was kind of bouncing around doing all sorts of stuff. So I did Interpol for 3 years. My contract concluded, and then I came to Dubai to essentially continue law enforcement stuff with a different agency, which I won't disclose, but just I'm doing some law enforcement stuff here. Mostly
some cool things. I'm
doing some cool stuff. Yeah. So my experience is not normal though, because most people, they'll stick with one law enforcement agency for like 30 years and they'll just stick with it. So if you go to NYPD in New York, like you stay at NYPD from the beginning to the end. And then when you're, older, you might do some Interpol stuff or whatever kind of like a victory lap, you know what I'm saying?
Okay.
But my career is bizarre because I actually had a bad back injury and stuff. So I went from, hardcore frontline policing, counter national security investigations, intelligence stuff.
You kind of got to see a little bit of
my
everything.
back, and then I had to like kind of pivot to like, fraud, to like all these different topics. So if you look at like my career profile, let's say on LinkedIn, you'll see that I kind of bounce around a bit, which wasn't my intention. That wasn't my initial goal. I even worked as a civilian within our Ministry of Public Safety in Solicitor General in British Columbia, working on law enforcement stuff from like the money side, like from the government down to the law enforcement agencies. So I've kind of bounced around, and my career is kind of bizarre. Which I didn't. So I'm into the art of sailing, not rowing. Like wherever the opportunities have come, just trying to maneuver.
So you've
around
worked
stuff
a lot in Canada, and now here in the Middle East. What could you say that the difference is with
especially finish you off, like from Canada to the Arab world, like that shift your perspective, like the justice, the accountability. Human behavior, like
that's a big question.
Kind of like a culture shock. Did you have?
Yeah, well, I'll give you one that was. So I've only been in Dubai for like 2 weeks, huh? So I'm brand new.
Still have a lot to learn.
Like I don't know how anything works here, but most of my work was in East Africa and Asia mostly. Let's say, but one thing I noticed is that if you're in a law enforcement cohort, let's say in Canada, most police officers in Canada will say, law enforcement's very inefficient. Like, we're not that good. There's always room to improve. But like usually the morale of how the system works is usually pretty low. But now that I've worked in many other countries, I'm like, man, like the North American law enforcement system is actually very efficient, which I didn't think of initially. So I'm like, wow, we're actually doing a pretty good job in a comparative point of view. But then on the other side, there's other interesting things you'll just get observationally. So for example, I worked a lot in Nepal with law enforcement there. Lovely people. The country's great. I really enjoy working there. I love those guys and girls. But one of the things that was interesting is that, let's say we pull over a vehicle, like we're doing a roadblock or something like that. I'm not doing it. I'm just watching because I'm Interpol. I'm just kind of a diplomat. I'm hiding behind the bushes.
You work with the police.
They kind of come under our purview.
But you're not legally allowed to arrest.
No, I'm hands off. I'm watching
behind the scenes type of guy.
Yeah, quality control.
Cool.
But what was interesting is that like in North America, for example, if you pull over a vehicle and it could be grandma in the car, like the police officers are trained for good reason to like really assume that there's an extreme risk in every interaction potentially. So when you go to the car, you're at 100. You're like, is someone coming out? Like, do I have to pull my gun?
And you guys stand on the side, like the back window.
Yeah.
I know all the tricks.
And you got to touch the trunk of the car.
Just in case they go away, right? Yeah. So it's like stressful. And I've got some good stories I can tell you about like where that's actually been like the case, right? So when you go up, there's good literature on this actually out of British Columbia, where the police officers' heart rates goes up to like, maximum. On every stop, right? They walk up because they're like, is this
you don't know what your adrenaline just shoots up.
And so then the window goes down and it's like a lovely person, but I'm at 100. So I'm like, am I going to shoot you? Like, give me a reason, And then all of a sudden that person de-escalates it for me. Because if they're at 100 and I'm at 0, then they've got the advantage on me, okay? So that's the North American context. Like people from North America will know that. But in like Nepal, for example, or in other countries I worked in, the idea that there would be a physical fight between the police and the public is like preposterous. So they don't actually perceive that that's even a possibility. So in Nepal, for example, we pulled over, we had a roadblock kind of thing going on at a border crossing. And we had like thousands of vehicles we contacted, not me, but the police. And they just walk up assuming that everything's good. So it's actually a super high trust society in that way. Where in North America, it's actually not. Like when I engage with you, I'm like, are you going to fight me? No one's thinking like that in most of the countries I worked in. The Philippines, you walk up, hey, like, there's just an assumption that the interaction will be.
Government doesn't trust their people, huh?
Yeah. Well, it's like, but it's just a reflection of the society you're in. It's not that the police are bad per se. It's more, the police are just the society that you're in.
That's all they know.
Yeah, and it's the same. You walk into a bar, there's going to be a fight, right?
Yeah, exactly. But I feel like here, or like, I don't know, I guess other countries you spoke up, they respect the police, they fear the police. Like I feel like now in Canada and America, it's like, F the police, F the popos,
Yeah, for sure.
So it's always like...
Yeah, in Canada, you can't be disturbed, like in the legal sense. So a person can essentially say anything to you.
Yeah, they just talk, like, they can swear at them.
Which is crazy,
That's insane.
Are they is that legal? Like, can the police do anything? Is that freedom of speech?
Well, it's freedom of speech, but the police officer can't be disturbed by, like, so if for example, like if I was a police officer in this setting in Canada, and you said something really mean to me, like, you're like, Fraser, you're the ugliest,
bleep, bleep,
your mom's this, whatever.
Yeah.
I'd be like, that's probably true, but
oh no,
that'd be my, I'd say something funny back, but I wouldn't be able to arrest you for just saying something mean per se. Now, if there was a third party there, like just a person walking down the street and they were disturbed, then I can say, that person's disturbed, which is like a breaking the law.
Right.
And I can arrest them under
Disturbing
several different, disturbing the peace or some other
Gotcha.
criminal code stuff like mischief or whatever. So that's common. So if you're making a ruckus, like you can't just, yell fire in a crowded room, you're going to get in trouble. But from the police officer's perspective, you can say anything. And it goes to an extreme because I don't want to say the word bad guys, some clients who are frequent passengers know that, and they'll really work in it. And so when I worked up in the north of Canada, like northern Saskatchewan and Northwest Territories and stuff in different communities, and one community, it was common for them to really yell at you. So when you had the bad guys in the back, it's called the silent patrolman, like the little holding cell in the back of the truck or car. Sometimes they would put their head right by the gap and they would scream stuff.
Oh, wow.
And there's a 10-minute drive to the police station from the community that I was working in. And I literally had earplugs, like to use on the daily basis, to put them in because the person would be yelling at me the whole time. Just to rile you up. And of course, like, maybe the 9 things don't hit you, but the 10th one does.
Right.
So be like, hey, I'm going to rape your girlfriend, like that kind of stuff. Or, hey, I'm going to I know where you live.
Pull over.
Yeah.
I'm going to get you. And so you can feel yourself like getting
heated.
Eventually something makes it through. Or if you have like a physical imperfection, like, man, I got a big nose. So like, that's where they go. That's where they go first, Or if let's say you're overweight, oh my goodness. Like,
they will pick on you.
You're in trouble. Yeah. So you got to really get a thick skin. And that can send you in a weird pathway in life because you can think the world's not so good, over time, or you can fight against that and inoculate yourself. So that's a key thing. But yeah, you won't get that in most countries.
Yeah.
Like that's not happening in Dubai.
Here that would not fly.
In Singapore, like if you look at the police sprung ban, like you're in trouble, right?
Singapore is quite strict.
Quite intense, right? So it's like, and then other countries are somewhere in the middle, but they don't suffer suffers long term. They don't have the same framework, and so you get different outcomes, which is key. Yeah.
True.
Why is that? Why is it that Canada and America, is it because of, I don't know, I feel like the police system there and the people, it's like war, it's like the police against the people. In some areas, like that's a big question. But I can give you an interesting answer, I think, or something to chew on. So for example, so I lived in Singapore for 3 years. Singapore is a relatively open society, but one thing for sure is that like the media apparatus, which has state intervention in it to an extent, to my understanding, is extremely pro-police, generally speaking, because policing is like 2 things. From a service delivery point of view, it's the data. So it's like, how many people do we arrest? Is crime down or up? Like the stats, Police stats are all cooked, by the way, because the way we collect it is like not very effective, and the way we maneuver the data, like it's not efficient. And I was like the data broker for the entire province of BC at one point, so I kind of know what I'm talking about a little bit on that. So when you get a police, and I can talk about this, when you get police data like showing up on the news article, just like take it with a big grain of salt. Don't just fall into the whatever narrative you're being sold, because there's that's the second part of policing. Does the community think the policing is effective? So the crime rate can be going straight up. But if you think that the police are doing a good job, that's like 90% of it, right? So that's why when you see on the news, it's like big drug bust. It's like, why do we put this on the news? Well, that's because we want to make sure that you think the police are good and that the service is trustworthy and good or whatever. So, but the police only control like one part of that. The second piece is like this kind of media apparatus, or maybe it's more complex than this, but let's just make it reductionistic or easy. So for example, in Singapore, if there's like a police altercation, like a police shooting, for example, I have one in my mind, the news article and all like the major outlets will say exactly why the police officer did that and like in defense of the actions. Now, if it's egregiously, if the police officer's in the wrong, they're not going to support the police officer. But if it's like a
what we say, like a legal or good shooting or whatever the action was.
Right. Like they got the bad guy.
Yeah, you'll read the news article and it's like the police officer had to shoot him because the guy had a knife and he was going to, and it's like, it's written in a way that's like very like, almost
like
too,
you have to agree.
It's not objective at all. It's very like the police officer
speaking
is a hero. Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off.
Oh, no.
Go on.
No,
Sorry.
This is the key point for Canada. On the Canadian context, it's the total opposite. The media apparatus, for whatever reason, and it's multivariant, is demonstrably not pro-police. So I'll give you an example. When I was a director in the Ministry of Public Safety and Solicitor General in BC, we would get these like operational action reports that were like countrywide. So if there was like a big shooting or a big like mass casualty event, it's just like a bulletin of just like the bare bone basic facts. So let's say a person got shot or, terrorist attack, just the details from the originating agency that's dealing with it. And they shoot that nationwide because there might be copycat attacks or just for awareness, right? So it's very like vague, but the media gets like the exact same piece of information essentially. So like that's the facts as they have it. There's no other information that you could leverage for like a news article. And if you I would get the report internally, and then you would see like, CBC or the other agencies report it. And they're like almost quoting directly from it because it's essentially like a public document. But then you'll see that they cherry pick stuff. So I'll give you an example. There was one where it was like a police officer in maybe an eastern province went to do a welfare check on an individual who had some mental health issues. The person pulled up to a porch, and this is again from this report, I wasn't there, pulled up to the porch, it's dark, a client that they had talked to many times, so it was, he made a mistake of maybe getting too close to the porch, could have been like maybe a little bit farther back. Person, as soon as he gets out of the vehicle, the victim in this context, lady runs out with a big knife and leaps over the porch to stab him. Oh. He just pulls his gun, he shoots. Unfortunately, the person dies. It's a sad story for everyone because she's obviously, it's like suicide by a police officer essentially. So she's mentally ill, he's messed up for life essentially. The whole thing's not positive. And so when you read the report, it's just the kind of facts on the ground as it is. Now, maybe that's not true. Maybe it isn't because, the courts will decide and there's an investigation to make sure everyone's telling the truth. Fair enough. But this is like the first 30 minutes after, right? And if you read all the news articles, it was like, and I'm using hyperbole here, but it's like mean police officer shoots woman,
lady,
she just came to the door with like a, not a butter knife. Yeah, but it's like then you're reading the release from the police agency, and it's 9-inch kitchen. I mean, the details are, but it's it's pretty factual that if you're just to read that one thing, you'd be like, okay, well, I can see why the police officer is put in a bad scenario.
Yeah. Right.
But the media just cooks it.
Makes you think.
Yeah. And then so and that specific one, I remember I was kind of mad about this. So I went to all the different news things and I looked at all the comments and it was like, police are the worst, police are the worst, police are the worst. And then there was one global news, which is a Canadian, broadcaster, one in Alberta, and they're kind of usually a bit more pro-police. Okay. And they just essentially copy pasted what was put out without any other context. They didn't twist it to make it positive or negative. It's just like the story I just described to you. Mm-hmm. And the comments in that were like, oh, the general comments were like, oh, it's a sad story. That poor cop, the poor woman, what a shitty scenario. Yeah. So that's what it was.
That's what it was.
That's how any reasonable person would have cooked it. But, I'm willing to spend some time to dig, but who else is going to? And if you get 100 of those, then your perception is really bad. And so my perception of Canadian police was terrible. I was like, we're the worst. Yeah. But then when you go abroad, you're like, damn, we're the best. Yeah. Which is not my perception going into it, which is very interesting.
Crazy.
Yeah.
The media can really change the narrative.
They changed. Yeah.
Holy.
Yeah. Well, and there's it's multivariant reasons maybe why they would do that. And some of it valid, some of it not. But it definitely doesn't help with the morale of the police or the interaction of the police with the people. Right. And I would say too, if you're a police officer going to a community that is, that's an example. If you go to places where, the common narrative would be that police are not wanted per se. It's usually the opposite. So if you go to places where the crime is high, they want more police, not less. Yeah. They're like, where's the police? We want them at every corner.
Yeah, but you would find that the police never go there.
Which it's there's Detroit, we lived in Chicago for a few years and south of Chicago, I believe, where it was really bad. The police never go there.
Interesting.
They will never.
Once in Detroit, remember? We were parked. We were waiting for our mom. She went into a rug shop in Dearborn. Cool. And we were just waiting in the car, chilling, listening to the radio. And we see this guy literally beating, like, bro, like it looked like a dude on like another dude just going at him.
Beating a woman.
The little kid was
with
there.
Kids running everywhere.
So
Crazy.
we pick up the phone, we call the cops. We're like, please, like, just come, hurry up. And they're like, what street are you on? And we're like, so-and-so. And they're like, okay.
They're like, is it the corner house? Yeah, we'll be there soon. And we're like,
no,
we've been there for like 30 minutes. I'm like, where's, like, we wanted to jump out and help the girl, but we're like,
oh, tough, yeah.
But
it's like that famous line. It's like when seconds count, the police are only minutes away. You know?
Yeah.
And sometimes too, it's like, and I that sounds like bad service delivery. Usually, like in big cities, there'll be like a mandatory minimum. So like it'll be like for time. So if it's a serious event, they triage it. So it'll be like, oh, if there's a shooting or like in that case, like a beating, like in a big city like Vancouver, it'll be like, okay, there's like a 5-minute max window or whatever the arbitrary number is. And if they don't make it there, then internally they're like, what happened? Like, why weren't we there within the time limit? So that would just be bad service delivery, generally speaking. But sometimes it's crazy too, though. Like I remember when I was working in some really high volume places, there would be like a file like that. But maybe there's only 4 or 5 of us working in a small community of like 5,000, up in the north or whatever. And there might be like 2 stabbings concurrently happening. Well, we got to send 2 to each. But now there's like maybe a sexual assault, like a rape also.
So you got to choose which one.
And then you go, well, there's we got to go 2 to, and it's like, do we split up? How do we do this? And sometimes it'll be like 24 hours before we go to another call. And that's not because I'm not interested. It's literally because the file flow is so high. And that's another thing to know too. It's like, I would say like, depends which country you're in, but 90% plus of files get written off at the street level. Like police attend, there might be an interest to pursue the file, but there's just not enough physical court space to run files, right? Like there's not enough judges to run like 1,000 files a day. And if you actually go to court, it's 4 or 5 days in court for a big file. Well, there's a big file every day. There's just not enough prosecutors, defense lawyers, and court room to do it. So police work is triage and risk just management. So maybe those guys were bad, but also maybe there was like a shooting down the street and they're just like, well, we'll get to it when we get to it.
Detroit.
I mean, if it's Detroit, it should be fast, but
it's crazy.
But another thing I always wondered, does it have to do with maybe racism? Like does the police sometimes take certain things more serious than others depending on the person or their ethnicity? Because they'll usually like say, describe the person. Like they hear,
what color?
Like, do they usually are like, no, let's go to the white people.
Oh, maybe. Case by case, right? This is what I was saying. For example, like I'll answer vaguely. I'll give you an example. Well,
so you don't get in trouble.
No, I'm happy to get in trouble, but it's just
please don't
no. It's such a big. That's an hour-long conversation in and of itself. But let me just give you like the variables that can be manipulated, right? Or used for and against. So, for example, like collecting data. Police officers collect the data, but no one signs up to be a police officer to collect data. Okay, so it's like if I arrested you, I don't like what would I put you as? There's boxes. Like I'm arresting you for a theft because you're like you're the bad thief. Such a harami for someone. I'm like where's the box for that, right? And then I'll go, are you white? Are you black? Like it's not relevant to my file. There's just like there's a form and it'll take because police work is paperwork, right? Like a 5-minute action by you is 5 hours for me of just endless forms to fill out, and that's useful because you want to make sure delivery service is standardized. But it's like, is that person black or white, or what's the nuance of that? Like the police officer isn't caring about that fundamentally. Like it's just like that. I'm just trying to prove the crime. Those elements are not relevant per se unless they're relevant. Per se. So the data collection is messy. And then it'll also be like, for example, like Calgary police would collect domestics. So domestics are like violence within the family. But one agency, and this is not right or wrong, one agency would say domestics are where physical violence occurs. Well, in Calgary, it was like any interaction where police attended, and I'm paraphrasing here, I'd have to go back and look at this, but it was like if we had a verbal argument and we were like brother and sister, they would classify that as a domestic. So domestics in Calgary are like anything. Absolutely astronomical comparatively to other contexts because the data collection is different. And there is some standardization at the federal and provincial levels, but not as much as you would think. So, and if you look at the data sets in the US and in Canada, in some of the research that I actually like held the pen on myself, where we looked at, for example, in the province of British Columbia, for they were renewing the Police Act, and which is the provincial legislation for how the police are supposed to function. We did some research into, for example, like stop Asian hate, for example. And it was me, like I'm in the mix. My analysts were not necessarily pro-police people per se. They were not police officers. They were interested in criminology and stuff. They were not police personnel. Obviously, I'm biased because I'm a police officer. But in that context, for example, the narrative was strong, but the data was like almost non-existent. So there's like, paraphrasing again, millions of police files generated per year in province of British Columbia. And that was like during the COVID time and stuff. The files for hate crimes as related to like Chinese Canadians or Asian Canadians did increase, but from an extremely low base. Okay, right? So the narrative was like rip roaring hot, but the number went, and I'm paraphrasing again, I'd have to look back on this, but it was like, from under 10 events per year, maybe the year prior, to maybe like, 20 or 30 events the next year. So as a percentage increase, it's like hundreds of percent. But out of 3.5 million calls, it's a rounding error. So in that case, again, like, does the media portray that as a number, or do they portray it as a percentage? So if you just Google that, Asian hate in British Columbia, it'll say hate crimes, which included like property crimes. So like if you sprayed like COVID came from China, we would consider that a hate crime.
Yeah.
Okay. And one person can do many of those. Okay. There was at least one assault that was legit, but it was a person who had, like I believe like a drug situation going on. He was from a street person who had assaulted someone based on like a legitimate hate crime. But this wasn't like the CEO of a company verbalized, you know what I mean? So it's different. And then we even sent in that province, we sent all the hate crime teams out to the communities that were affected to like see if we could dig up files. And that was like the maximum amount. So again, I'm paraphrasing and leaving it vague here on purpose. But generally speaking, in that case, just as an example, to something to consider, like there was an increase, but as a percentage, it's almost zero. To me, it's a non-factor. If you were to be born anywhere as a person, British Columbia is probably your best place. West Coast Canada, like just if you were born a white baby or a black baby or any baby, that would be a very good place to be born, because the data was essentially zero. But if you go on, you just Google it, it'll say from the reports that like my team facilitated, the data we pulled was like to me essentially, or to my team. It was like a non-entity, but they portrayed it like it was huge. So that's an example, and you can just extrapolate that across multiple domains. Now, the police are not innocent either in this. We like the analysts will maneuver data to support them in ways that maybe it's not the best either. So there's a holistic way to look at it, but just be careful, because the epistemology of like, or the truth of the data can be pushed and pulled in weird ways. That makes sense? I'll leave it vague like that.
True.
So make your just have an opinion, but hold it lightly. And let new information guide you.
Exactly.
Because I can pitch it both ways convincingly.
Well said.
So you've worked in some of the darkest corners of law enforcement, from human trafficking to terrorism. How do you mentally separate the job from the trauma? Like, I'm sure you've seen some things that the brain cannot process. Like, how do you...
Perhaps, yeah. That's a big question.
Because I've seen some things as a normal, like, and
we're
I'm
seeing it every day.
traumatized. I can't imagine what you've seen, especially with child, like sex trafficking, and I don't know how. Like, I would,
everyone has like a cup, and then everything you experience or see kind of puts a little bit of water in that cup. So everyone has a point where their cup is full. So for example, at Interpol, most of the stuff I was doing was related to sexual crimes. So after 3 years, my cup is not completely full. It's not overflowing, but I'm like, I'm getting there. Yeah. And I'm pretty robust on that, kind of stuff, but everyone has a kind of limit. Some people's cups are smaller and some people's cups are bigger. The most interesting thing I've found is that some people have a structured plan that they can verbalize to you to process information that's negative, and some people do not. And the people that do not have a framework to process and reframe things often suffer unnecessarily. And the people that have a bit of a framework can maneuver through those things better and be sort of better performer. So I can give you a good example of that. Like when I was working up in northern Canada, I was in essentially the place with the highest crime index in Canada, approximately 150 times the average, but that's actually lowballing it, because the way data was collected there was poor and cooked, like I was mentioning.
It could have been more than there actually.
It's significantly more, but just like a really high crime and just, if you're just a person living in that community, you might see one thing a month, but I'm going to everything. So I'm seeing a couple things a day stacked for years, right? So then it just adds up.
Yeah.
So you can tell who's doing well because some police officers will show up with their boots untied. Their uniform's messy. They haven't washed it for like a week. It's like a subtle protest of just life.
Sign of like,
They rip the computer out of the wall and throw it down the hallway.
Especially with like sex trafficking.
I was just showing her like a video today on just basically they found a group chat of offenders speaking to each other. And like the rage that you get, and they're asking like, oh, how old do you have one? And it's like a baby. They're talking about babies. Or the man's daughter, he's like, don't worry, I'll try things later. And they send like new techniques to each other. Like, how do you not want to just, when you see these kinds of people, not want to
that's one
strangle
question.
them.
Exactly.
And
okay, got you.
And the justice system. Like I've seen a lot of stories like that UFC fighter where the offender was off on bail, and the father that shot the guy but didn't kill him, unfortunately,
Oh yeah,
stayed in jail.
Well, I got lots of stories like that.
Right? Like, when you're going to someone who's done some effed up shit to kids, like, do you guys just like, give them a little, like how do you treat them different? Because I would be like,
So for example, so again, it comes back to how you process information. When I first started, the answer would have been like, like you said, like you saw something that sent you off the rails a bit. I would have been the exact same. But very quickly, I realized that if I'm inhabiting that mindset like 3 times a day, then I'm gonna.
You're just screwing yourself.
I can feel myself imploding, like psychologically. So essentially, I went into the literature, psychological, but also philosophical, and just. It created a framework. I essentially inoculated myself. I gave myself like the vaccine in advance, if that makes sense. Wasn't Moderna, it was no side effects. So I essentially created a framework to process information, and everyone's going to have their own personal version of this. But for example, one of the things I would do is I would say compassion versus empathy. Okay. So empathy is feeling what the other person feels. So usually that generates a really strong response. And that's great with your family. Your kid stubs their toe.
So you're saying like empathizing. What's the word? Empathizing with the offender?
It's seeing it from their perspective, but also the victim. Like you're mad because there's probably a victim and there's these emotions that pop up. Okay. So even if I'm feeling that, I'm defining the words. We probably agree, but just maybe on definition, it might be different. So if you're highly empathetic, you're going to burn out immediately because every person you see, every victim you meet, it's just like, it's soul crushing. Like you meet a victim of trafficking or sex crimes, like they're not happy. And being police is the worst, man, because like no one's happy. Even if you do the right job, people like will thank you maybe, but they're like sad. It's not like a firefighter where you save the day and people are like, you pull the cat out of the tree and people will like hug you. Like my favorite calls were fire calls because I was up in the remote indigenous communities and stuff, and they'd light fire sometimes, and we'd put it out with our little, because the firemen would take a long time just because they're part-time or whatever, and I would like put out a fire and people were like, thank you, and I was like, this is what it feels like to be a hero, like the best, because the police calls, even if you do the right thing, people are like sad, the energy is low, right? So you're like, well, I guess I did the right thing. So if you're empathetic, you'll burn out of policing immediately. This is true if you're like an emergency worker or in any capacity, like you're a doctor at the ER, you're going to burn out too. And there's good data on this. There's a really good book called Against Empathy by Paul Bloom. I recommend this to anyone who works in that field. People who naturally are empathetic burn out really quickly. But people who are compassionate, which is to say you do the right thing because it's the right thing regardless. So my vision is I'm going to be the best version of myself, or I'm going to focus on the highest good. And then you action that, then it doesn't matter about the outcome at all. It's about, did you keep your conscience clean? And that immediately reframes things in a very effective way. So remember when the guy was yelling at me through the thing, I had my little earplugs? Right. I would literally verbalize like compassion. Wow. So I'm not going to punch this guy in the face because that's what my 12-year-old boy wants to do framework. I'm going to do the right thing and I'm going to, help this guy out. Because, if I was in his situation, I would be the exact same as him. You see what I'm saying? So it completely reframes it if you have that highest vision of the good as your framework, or as what you're viewing, and then you'll ask yourself the right questions to put yourself on the quest to give that person good service delivery. And that has guided me beautifully well.
Whatever can help you sleep at night or interact with your loved ones without carrying that like guilt.
And then the second piece that really helped me, again, it'd be different for everyone, was I was like, oh, is there free will or is there not? And again, it doesn't matter if this is true or not philosophically, it's operational, it's tactical. So if someone's yelling at me, I go, oh, I turn it into like I intellectualize it. So I go, oh, he's yelling at me, like my big nose, like, ugh, or whatever, And my mom, like, she's so nice. Like, why would you say she's not nice or whatever? I would start to get the feeling of like anger or sadness or whatever the emotion is. And that's fine. You got to process that later. But I would just go, oh, interesting. Like this person is just like a machine. They're back. They've got their personality traits that are kind of locked in, big five, and they've got their experiences. And it's just generated a scenario where in this context, this is how they act. I wonder why. So like that question, and now they're yelling at me. And I'm like, oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Like why? It's like when you see a homeless person yelling, you're like, oh, like what's happening over there?
I wonder what you're talking
I'm so curious. And I'm like, oh, like, like, tell me. And then if you read the psych report, it's like, oh, their first memory, being raped. Okay. At first consciousness, don't even know the age.
Yeah.
Second memory, like, being raped by someone else.
Right.
Third memory, raping someone because it becomes a power thing. It's not about sex.
Gosh.
Okay, yeah, right. And then you go, oh God, or oh gosh, or whatever. And then you read like the 2 pages or 3 pages of just absolute carnage because some people live that life and you just don't know it. And you're like, oh, like he was actually really nice to me. Because if that happened to me, like I would be gone a long time ago, right? So as soon as you intellectualize like that cuts it too. And I knew it was working because like a person would be mean to like, let's say me and my partner, police partner person. And then he would be jacked up or she would be jacked up for like the whole shift. But I'd cleared it in like 30 minutes. And I was like, okay, I got it. And so that's carried me in all life scenarios.
Yeah,
so I literally will say, clear the slate, next play. And that's in American football because you do one play at a time. And and when I'm coaching because I coach little kids football, I actually implement those frameworks into the team as well.
Smart.
You had a bad play, clear it, next slide. Did you do the right thing? Did you try your best? That's all that matters. You can't control outcomes. That's stoicism. So I don't control the outcome.
Tough.
I reframe no matter what.
You have
we had one where it was like, it wasn't a crime. It was just a sad scenario where someone backed up over a child and killed them, and like a young child. And it was unfortunately like the parent who did it. Again, no one's fault.
So many stories like that.
Super sad. Like
so
that.
scary.
And I never thought, this is where it gets messed up. If you haven't imagined it as possible and you come across it, then you're in trouble. Okay. Like that's where it gets you. And so for example, like if I say, if we're in a car and I say, hey, we're going to crash the car in 30 seconds, you like put on your seatbelt.
Yeah, you're ready for
we have a little crash.
impact.
You're good. It was fun. Like go-karting. Like you crash 10 times a second, right?
Sure.
But if I didn't tell you and we got in a little crash, like all of us, including me, I'd be like, oh, like I'm calling my mom. It's a disaster. I got to go to therapy for a month.
Seriously.
So I pulled up like as it had just happened. So there was no like police call to be like, hey, like where you get 30 seconds to kind of
know what you're walking into.
You just kind of like have a second to kind of go, okay, what am I going to do? Right. Like, I just kind of appeared and it was, a bad scene.
Like, what's the first thing that just rushes through your head?
I was kind of like space cadet, right? Because you don't have a second to kind of process.
The brain is not braining.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
In my experience, most police officers have trouble. It's when if you get 30 seconds to acclimatize in advance, you're totally fine, right? But if you just show up and something weird happens, that's what gets that fills the cup the fastest. Let's put it that way, at least to me. Or I've observed that anecdotally. But so in that scenario, I was like, oh God. And I was like, I got to do the right thing no matter what. Compassion. The outcome's out of my control. It's stoicism, but Eastern philosophy is like that too. And then I'm just going to reframe this to be positive. So I was like, not positive, but useful. So my soul is intact. My conscience is clean. So when I got there, I didn't even know what to do, like process wise. Like I was just like, I'm just going to do the best I can with like just to just try to make this situation better.
The situation.
Okay. And then when I left, I was sad, but I was like, I did the right thing and that's it. And then I clear the slate, next play, next round.
I would try, I've always wanted to be a police officer. I've always, but hearing your stories, I don't think I could be able to cope with that.
So if you read that, I'm paraphrasing here. If you read that Paul Bloom book, for example, they had some sort of ability to test on people's baseline for empathy and compassion as just like as a baseline walkthrough. Okay. And they took 9/11, like the terrorist attacks, as a template. So they went to all and I'm paraphrasing again, you got to read it. This years ago. They took all the paramedics, first responders in general, and it's like thousands of people though, right? And they said they ranked them. So half were, I'm paraphrasing again, half were empathetic, half were compassionate. on their metrics. And then they did a rough analysis of how those people handled the situation after the fact or how they perceived it. So all the empathetic people were like, I don't know what the percentages were, but it was a strong showing. Worst day of my life. Nothing was ever the same. The world is dark, like I thought.
All emotional.
I thought the world, just because it's just so sad, right? Or so heartbreaking. And then the compassionate people were like, sad day, but the most important day of my life. See the reframe? It's where I did my best work. All the training came into that one day. And I saved people, motherfucker. Right? See the difference? Like one sends you and one destroys you.
You choose what you want to.
So I know when I do it too. Like if I'm at the scene of something and I can and it's messed up and I can feel it. I'm like, I'll actually say, I'll be like compassion. And as soon as I know what the path is, I become whole. Like my brain's in pieces and it just locks in. And then I'm just like, boom. And even if it doesn't work out, I'm like, well, I just did the right thing. I'm obligated to. If you can be secular or religious in that context.
Right.
Like I'm obligated to do the right thing. God, it's not about me.
God did.
And then when you walk away,
God did.
And then even if it was a crapshoot and it worked out, because you can never control the outcome. So it's like, even if it worked out poorly by your own determination, you just reframe and say, okay, like I did my best. That's all I got. And then you just clear it next. Right? And then I'm totally fine.
But does it clear? I know you say that to yourself. That do you, like when you go to sleep, do you not think about
that kid
or
that
maybe
would kill
the child
you slowly? That would kill you slowly.
Like for example, once upon a time, we woke up into like our friend passed away. He was our neighbor. I grew up with him. It was Christmas Eve. The girlfriend was running up and down the hall screaming. So, we go to see what's happening. We go into the apartment, long story short, and he's dead in his bathtub. And my brain could not cope. Like I was looking at him and I was like, no, he's up, like, because I know him. I grew up with him, my family there. So it was very traumatizing. Like my brain wasn't processing what's happening, what I'm looking at. I was literally just doing laps around the building. I didn't know what to do. I'm just carrying my little dog, just going up and down. And I didn't know how to cope with it. And even until now, I think about it. Like
it's almost when you have to like get out of the shock, though.
It was very. That's what I mean. Like I'm sure there's.
So did you come across that like unexpectedly?
Unexpected,
yeah. So that'll get you, right?
And I've never seen that. I've never seen someone dead in my life like that.
I think over time, eventually, like I know this sounds crazy, which ties into my next question: is you almost get
immune to it, like you're used to it, kind of.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying it doesn't shock you every time, but it's almost like, okay, here's the next one. Here's the next one.
Yeah. Well, the world is, entropy exists. So everything you've got will be taken away from you in the material sense, at least, right?
Yeah.
So I'll give you an example of, and I'm sorry that experience happened to you, because I totally get it.
Yeah, like
I totally get it.
Sad. So I'm sure you have dealt with like.
But now, so like if right now, I mean, hypothetically, if I said there's a deceased person in the other room, I'm going to give you like 30 seconds to just sit on that. You probably wouldn't have the same, because you go, okay, like take a moment,
He's already, gone.
Right?
Away.
Exactly. Yeah. And if it's someone you didn't know, then, there's layers to it. So I get it. But this can hit you in weird ways. And this is actually, I think, really good advice. Is my mom gave this to me by her experience. So my mom's a total badass. She's like this tall. She's hardcore. She's
That's
like,
where you get it
she's
from,
a doctor lady. And she's like worked abroad and stuff. Like she's done some crazy. She's like, if I'm here and
get her on her show next time.
Everyone likes her more than me for good reason. She's super cool. And that's great. But like nothing phases this lady, right? Like there's no scenario where she's just all logic. Like just, I didn't know people could be even emotional until I was like 20. You know what I'm saying? Like she just powers through. It's just solutions. Like she's very good at this naturally. So she's the perfect person for her kind of work. Okay. Yeah. But she had intuitively perceived her house as like the place where no entropy could exist. Okay. So like her house was like the fortress, because in this nice little Canadian town and everything's like magical, and right? And so
Narnia.
Yeah, Narnia. Yeah, like literally Narnia. It was just the fortress. So, okay, cool. So the house gets broken into just randomly, like pure bad luck. A person who's mentally ill just starts breaking into all the houses in the neighborhood and just goes in and doesn't really even steal much, just like throws stuff on the ground. Yeah. Okay. So for me, I'm like, well, I see 10 break-ins a day. Like it's nothing. Like it's not even worth calling me about. I'm like, well, yeah, just like clean it up. Like next, like it's nothing. And my dad's like, yeah, it's fine. Like, it's bad luck, but that's how it goes. But my mom was like like absolutely gutted by that because in her mind, that wasn't possible. See what I'm saying? Okay. Right? Because her worldview did not include that piece. So part of like my inoculation is to read as much dark literature as I possibly can. I'm reading about the Holocaust. I'm the cops show, like all these TV. I'm taking as notes.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I'll eventually come across that. And if I'm not prepared for it, then it'll get me. See what I'm saying? So that's super key.
Smart,
So I literally, like when I leave my apartment, sometimes I'm like, everything will be gone. I'm inoculated.
Just to like,
yeah. And I go, oh, everyone I know is going to die.
Just kind of
now that's not maybe the healthiest.
Brace yourself.
But it's already baked in. So when it happens, I've got my 30 seconds already baked in. Does that kind of make sense? Now, not everyone needs to do that across the spectrum. Yeah. But you got to think, where am I super vulnerable? Right? And it's those blind spots, and that'll get you. And if you just explore that, then you inoculate yourself, and you can be, it's like if someone passes away, you can be the person at the funeral who like you wanted to be there. Who's like, what's up? I got this. Yeah. Right? Because you prepped. But if you come in blind,
you're unlocking a whole other like strength, like mental strength.
Yeah, like I think I can probably be able to cope with all that, but the sex trafficking with kids, I don't know how you guys do it. I wouldn't.
Yeah, and the people
turn
who
off
do,
the cameras.
I'm not the best. Like I walk on all fours most of the time. Like I'm not. Yeah. I'm average at best. But when I was at Interpol, there was some ladies who shall not be named, but who deserve like medals on medals on medals, and all they do is they work the ICSA databases, ICSE. It's one of our databases for online child sexual abuse. You can Google it, and they all day look at content. Like I don't have to look at the content necessarily. Sometimes I'm just like reading the file, and which is bad, but not as. They have to go through the content,
the videos,
like line, like second by second, because we're trying to locate victims or offenders. God. So it's like that Coke can, that's from Malaysia. That school uniform, that's from this school.
Oh God.
We have tools to help with that and stuff. And it's crazy because sometimes it's pay to play kind of stuff, right? Like the abuse is happening today, but also tomorrow because the group chat, they're paying for.
Oh my God. So you're like in today's time knowing that it's
these ladies who are fucking heroes will like, and it's all women. It's no dudes for whatever reason. I think the girls just start, you go stronger like no, because the guys just lose their minds, right? girls. For what it's always, at least seems this way. Constantly, they do the best work in my opinion. This group, and they just crush bad guys. They just go, he's at this house. Here's the IP. Bam, send it, and then police go and save those people. Yeah. So Interpol is like any big government grouping. 50% is you could get rid of and nothing would change. Just like any big government thing, it's lots of bloat, whatever. But there's some stuff, specifically that kind of work, the online child sexual exploitation stuff, where some of the ladies that do that work are like legitimately like saving lives on a daily basis. And it's just like, no one knows. It's like
behind the scenes.
They go home to their family.
For real. But imagine, okay, so get this. So this would make me sad. Imagine you can't locate that person, but it's a live file and the abuse continues.
Oh my
so
God.
You go home and you're like, well, and there's other groups that do it too. Like this is the whole theme is like that. Like there's something called NCMEC in the US and other agencies that do that work. Like it's not just Interpol, but like that whole community. And that's why there's a cap. You can't do it for 30 years operational like that, because I think you would
mentally,
no matter how strong your framework is, you're going to have some issues with that.
We're going to switch focus a little bit here.
I'm ready.
So you've written some books on finance and have a deep insight into the financial world.
Okay.
From macro investing to real world application.
Yes.
Now, the question for you, Fraser, is what inspired you to shift focus from global crime to global finance?
Okay, that's crazy. Did not expect that. Okay, so I'm a weirdo, as you can already tell. So there's two. Well, that's true. There's
good to be a weirdo nowadays. Trust me.
There's two versions of me. There's crime fighter guy, like researcher, police person, and then on the other side of me is I really like the topic of finance per se. So. When I was in university, I didn't have an interest in this necessarily from a young age. My grandfather was big into stocks and stuff, and he would kind of try to poke around. So it was in my mind at a young age, but I wasn't well versed in this. But I played football in university, like American football with like the spandex and the helmet.
This type of football, not that.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't say that here,
soccer.
By the way.
No, yeah. No,
it's giving you
the football with the feet is the real football.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm happy to admit that.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I just played for the spandex. It's a different life. Anyways, but there was a strong alumni. So when I was done that, like when I was done my sort of that experience, I wanted to go into policing, but at that particular time, the policing was hard to get into. And that's another thing too about policing, by the way. Like in Canada, it's actually hard to be a police officer.
Yeah,
27 is the average age for males, younger for females because there's less applicants.
Yeah.
They like to make it as 50-50 as possible in most agencies. But if there is this last piece on this racism point, like we vet hardcore for all those factors. So if the police are like systemically racist, which I would doubt that from the data, okay, at least in Canada. We can talk about that another time maybe. But like that's the best people we can possibly get. Like we vet hard, we dig. Like we don't just like talk to you. We talk to your friends three levels down.
Yeah, you guys.
And then if you are interacting with a certain racial group over and over again, like statistically on the system, like someone will come and chat with you. There's internal people who do nothing but look for that kind of stuff. So if you're maybe the old back in the day, but if you're like a new police officer today, if you're wanting to enact a racial agenda, you would never do policing. It'd be the worst place to do it. Like, does the doctor get like reviewed for how he treats different patients by race? No one's checking in any field, but policing we do like ruthlessly.
Okay. Yeah, so all right. Okay.
Yeah. So if I was like, I'm like a young racist and I just want to like really like the policing is like the last place you would do it because that's the only place where we actually screen for that aggressively and we like literally scan for it on the back end. And in my opinion, the data is
I've run into a few Karens here and there in the policing world, like literally female cops.
They're the worst.
Yeah, they're rude sometimes.
Most interactions with police are at like the traffic level. And I find that usually the interactions are really unfriendly.
Oh my God, so unfriendly.
They just let me go.
I've cried many times.
Oh, I cry too. Oh my God, the worst. Yeah.
How are you so...
Wait, don't get off topic.
Finance, sorry, go. Okay, so there's policing side and there's finance side. And so when I was waiting to get into policing, I had this 2-year window because it took me 2 years to just like get through the process. Right. And I worked in the alumni from my football team said, hey, we got lots of guys in finance. Are you interested in that? And I always was interested and I got super lucky, pure like nepotism. I got put into a company in Canada that for financial advising, essentially for like high net worth kind of groupings. And I got this amazing education in finance because it just happened to be like the best office in like all of Canada by volume of like sales and incomes and stuff like that. But also
what year was
this? This was like 2011, I guess.
Okay, so things were like things were doing good.
At that point it was kind of crawling back. So that put the biggest thing for me was I realized from that education that the system is not neutral. So if you're ignorant to the financial system that you inhabit, the system will punish you for that. So you're either winning or you're losing, but you can't just ride neutral because if you're neutral, you're actually losing. And so essentially that set me on a long journey because policing was sort of a fixed income, but I also used finance to make money through like long-term investing essentially. But I'm deep in the weeds. I did like in my travels, I've done like everything from like day trading to like swing trading to like I've done the whole element of that, like 2 to 3 hours a day. So my biggest knowledge vertical is actually in finance, not in law enforcement at all, which is weird. Yeah, that's a weird thing to do. So it's just my side hustle, but that's where if I were to make my wealth, let's say, it comes from that. And I can see it too, because I would do like financial plans for people, even when I was in the police force. Like we'd be like having a break and I'd say, hey, like, what's your structure? And so I know how much you make. You're a third-year guy, you make, let's say $100,000 on the dot, because I just know that that's how much you make. And you can't really make more than that unless you're doing something weird, which you're not.
Shady stuff.
Yeah, but I'm making the same amount. I have a structure that generates wealth and protects it kind of over a long period of time. And 10 years later, I'm in a different position than you, even though we're in the same bucket income and we're roughly in the same demographic
context. What do you do different that maybe you could inspire and give insightful advice, maybe 3 steps on starting from nothing and building up in the
starting from the bottom.
Exactly, literally.
Well,
what are we doing?
Yeah,
what are we not doing?
I got you. Fundamentally, there's wealth accumulation and wealth protection. Just like if you just split it into 2. So wealth protection is like life insurance. If you die, like is your family broke or like do they get some money? Right? No one likes to talk about that.
Yeah, I know, right?
Disability, like if you go down, because 1 out of 3, at least in Canada, 1 out of 3 people will get disability for at least 1 year in their life. And I'm like that. I was like fit and ready to go.
And then
I had 2 back surgeries and I was legit disabled for like over a year. Wow. I couldn't walk for more than 30 minutes. So I had to switch from frontline policing to other stuff. Yeah. So I had a sweet disability plan. I didn't need it because I was in the police force and they covered me for that period, but I was set for life, which is stress relief.
Yeah.
There's critical illness as well, where if you get a bad injury or you get a severe like cancer or something like that, you just get a lump sum of money, etc. So that's one bucket that no one likes to do, but it's super important. The second bucket, and this is more to your question, is wealth accumulation. And there's roughly two buckets in the financial realm for that. One is like trading, buying and selling things quickly. That's a skill set. So if you want to do that, you can make lots of money, but it's like playing the violin.
Sorry, like crypto and all that stuff?
Could be,
okay.
But it could also be buying like assets like equities, for example, like stocks, right? Sorry, this is like 1,000 hours condensed into like one little short thing.
You're doing great.
Don't worry, it'll come together.
You're doing great, sweetie.
But if you, I'm trying, Mom, I'm trying. but if you're trading is like a skill set. So if I gave you like a trombone, you're probably not very good at it unless you played lots. So I've played for like 20 years, 17 years now. So I can play a song that you'll like, and shit. So that means I'm making money.
True.
Okay?
True.
Okay. So, but trading is its own thing. So just cross that off if you're not interested. Because if you're not interested now, you're probably not going to be interested.
About it.
Yeah. Like at 20, you should be like digging into it.
Yeah.
But investing, which is buy something for a long time and hold it, is a tried and true method that works since 1895, and soon as the data's been good. And that's essentially like, imagine like a bathtub. There's water in it. Water is the money in this context, in this metaphor. Through the process of GDP growth and economic expansion, more water goes into the bathtub. So we're just going to buy the whole bathtub. And that's going to be stocks in America, stocks in Canada, other equity markets like Dubai or UAE or developed. It's a technical kind of definition. And then maybe something happens. Trump starts a war or something crazy, like a meteor hits the planet, right? The bathtub will go up and down, and we don't know what's going to be up and down. So we just buy the whole thing because we know all the boats are rising over time. So the US equity market, for example, which is half the world's stock market, because money goes to where it's treated well, and the US is the best for that, rule of law, easiest financial markets to get access to capital, et cetera, has gone up at approximately 10 to 11% per year over any 10-year period since 1895. That's through World War I, World War II, Great Depression, world financial crisis, like everything, right? OPEC shocks, the whole thing, COVID, whatever. So essentially, if you just buy and hold this asset allocation, then you put yourself in a very nice position over a long period of time. That's fundamentally it. And now it's even crazier because like in the current context, we're in a unique context. We've got inflation, which is high. We've got currency debasement, which is really high. And those are related, but two separate things. So inflation is like the apple costs more in the store. Like, oh my God, my apple went from $1, $1 kilo to $2 or whatever the price is. Gasoline,
which it is,
which is a struggle. But you also have debasement, which is fundamentally, in a short version, is when the currency is more currency is created over time, and it debases the currency that you're purchasing things with. So your purchasing power drops. So you have $1 million in your bank account. Cool, that buys $1 million worth of goods today. But if you're getting debased in like 5 years, maybe that $1 million is $500,000 in purchasing power. So the number looks the same to you, but you can't buy the same thing. And so you can see this because stock markets and assets have risen higher than average on a year-to-year basis because of this debasement effect. So in Canada, it's about 8% year over year since like 2008 almost, and specifically rose a lot since COVID. So all of the different governments right now are debasing quickly because we have too much structural debt. Private debt, like how much houses you own, corporate debt, and also government debt. Like Canada's 370% of GDP in debt.
I wonder why the government is in debt.
Right? I wonder.
Well, yeah. So
take a wild guess.
Yeah. And so one of the solutions they're doing to keep the game going is to debase the currency to run deficit spending fiscally, and then inject more cash into the system to try to grow the economy faster than the debt. Now that's problematic for various reasons. That's a different conversation. But essentially, if you're just an individual like me, if I want to gain wealth, I have to do better than the 3% and the 8% combined.
Wow.
Plus tax, which is UAE.
Where's your tax? Where is your tax money going? That's the question.
I have a good answer for that. Actually,
we all know where it's going.
Yeah. So the only two is the last piece because I can go all day, as you can tell. The only two asset classes since 2008, the Great Financial Crisis there or whatever, that have beaten the debasement effect and the inflation is the NASDAQ, which is a technology play, let's say, because there's more Internet of Things, and crypto, but specifically Bitcoin. So those are the only two asset classes. If you bought the whole bathtub, like I was referring to, you include that, so you're a little bit above it, but you're essentially flat. So you haven't lost wealth, but you haven't advanced.
Like just right there.
Now, most people don't do that. They buy like nothing, or they're sitting lower. So you're doing better than the person beside you.
Yeah.
Right? So like, if you don't invest and I do, I retain my wealth, but you're actually getting poorer on your assets.
Imagine we like walked around as humans with like this like
it's crazy.
with like over our heads, seeing who has more. It's like, oh, you are
rich as hell.
Yeah,
seriously, I made it. I'm trying to get there.
I'm still trying to make it.
100%. Yeah. And so it's been a struggle. So I actually like wrote a book on this because I was so incensed. Because when I talk to the average person, like this is, to me, it's knowledge that I am aware of, but it's actually esoteric. People aren't aware that they're in an environment where like they're actually being essentially, their wealth is being drained from them in a way that they don't anticipate. So there's ways to get around it. And I've just said, buy the bathtub, which includes all the asset classes.
I want to buy the bathtub.
Yeah, me too. I want it too.
You want to buy the bathtub. Yeah. So, but there's more to it than that. But essentially you're in a situation where if you do nothing, you're getting absolutely destroyed over the long time. It's not today, it's not tomorrow, but 10 years from now, you're going to be in much worse position. But if you learn enough, or you find someone you trust, so like you got me, you can call me anytime. But if there's no one, if you don't have that knowledge yourself, you're getting destroyed. Literally, your wealth will be eroded, which is crazy.
Okay, so this is a bit of a long one, so bear with me. God. I'm sorry. Okay.
I'm ready.
You've worked across different countries with completely different legal systems, political pressures, and definitions of justice. Have you ever felt caught between two moral frameworks where legally you've meant to enforce something but morally doesn't sit right? Hold on now. I'm just going to give you an example.
Oh my gosh.
Take Palestine, for example.
Okay.
What's considered resistance by one side is labeled terrorism by another. Entire systems are built around protecting power, not people. So when the law contradicts human rights, how do you personally decide what's right? And can justice ever exist outside the law?
That's quite you should.
So since you're like philosophy of justice. A little bit of both.
Okay, I gotta think about it. So the first part of the question is there been a scenario where I thought, tell me if this is wrong, right? Where there's a scenario where the law would say one thing, but the scenario would
be completely
like Palestine.
Different.
Yes, correct.
Well, the Palestine Israel thing is different because it's in the international context. So it's like my experience is like law within. So from a structure point of view, right? Like at the level of the country, there's laws that are enforced or not, but you can there's one entity that controls the monopoly of violence. So the police and the criminal justice system control the monopoly of violence. That's their fundamental function. And then if you deviate outside of the norms of that context, whichever country you're in, then the system activates against you or not.
True.
In the international realm, there's just norms, right? Like there's international law, but there's no enforcing body. So historically, after the World War II context and the UN grouping kind of US-led Western liberal order came into effect, in theory, the Western groupings were supposed to enforce the norms or the international laws that are put on paper. But if there's no one to enforce it, if there's no government, international government, let's say, because there doesn't exist, then it's almost impossible to enforce that. So the only norm really is, the biggest one is sovereignty. So states shouldn't go into other states. That's the one baseline. But that's being eroded with like the sort of Russia-Ukraine context, right? That's why that's super important geopolitically, right? One state intervening in another state for land to keep it, which is interesting. So there's two separate questions there. But in the policing realm, to go back to your first question, it's very difficult, especially so I'll give an example. In Canada, we have a catch and release program fundamentally. So you'll see people get arrested for let's say an assault, and then you'll arrest them, you put them in jail, and you don't put them in jail to punish them. Like they get punished themselves internally. Like their souls get crushed.
Right.
And this is a whole other conversation. Like you put someone in a cell and they know they've done something bad. Like they
see them crumble.
They suffer in there.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if the jail cell is nice or not. Like if you just put people by themselves and they got nothing to distract themselves, they punish themselves because they fundamentally know that it's a bad thing. You can see it. Like you just the body language. They that's fine. You put them in jail mostly to protect the public and protect us, like the police officers too, so they don't reoffend, right? Because you don't want people to go out there unless they're able to not reoffend. But in the Canadian context, often people reoffend endlessly, especially like in certain Indigenous communities, for example. Like you'll have glading factors.
The Indigenous
where
people,
they have special
for example.
case law that suggests that like, like the sentence should be served in the community, or the cultural narrative. For whatever reason in the courts, they don't get long sentences for certain crimes if they're born and raised and live in the Indigenous context. So you'll get people who have done like manslaughter or murders who are out in like a few years. And then you'll see their criminal record and you see like multiple people or multiple like manslaughters or multiple rapes or whatever. And they're like 40 and you're like, how's this person out? Just from a risk point of view, right?
Yeah.
Again, I might disagree with how that framework exists, but again, I'm obligated to work within the system that I'm in.
Exactly.
So maybe I become prime minister one day and I can fix that. But if I'm in the system, I'm still obligated to do what I can in the context. Now, internationally, the laws might be way different. So I've definitely worked in some places, like let's say Bangladesh, for example, has a completely different system. That maybe there's some parts of it I disagree or agree with, but I'm still obligated to do the right thing how I see it. Now, the downside is that the right thing that I think is the right thing might not be the right thing. Right. So there's that's a question of ethics philosophically and epistemology, because I don't have perfect information. I'm not God, nor do I want to be. So I don't have that perfect information. I'm not all knowing in the future and in the past. So I fundamentally can have a position on where things should be, let's say on international relations like Palestine, Israel kind of thing. But because I don't have perfect information, I can have an opinion, but it's got to be very loosely held. And I have to provide a real critical element of constantly evaluating my position, because over every year, my position might change as new information comes in. And so if you meet someone who's very dogmatic, like this is right and this is wrong, cool, but hold that with a loose hand, because is new information. You don't have perfect information, and it's possible you could be wrong. And then if you just continue that endlessly, then it's kind of like the Sam Harris moral landscape argument. The society will move and shift, and you can kind of maneuver with it and agree or disagree. And where you disagree, you can say something and do something. Right. True. So an acute example would be like slavery was bad or good. Now it's bad or whatever. Something like that's very black and white to us now. At the time, everyone was on board. Right. So your position now will look ludicrous to someone 1,000 years from now, probably. So we got to make sure that we have a real critical lens to maneuver through those spaces. And if you don't have that, then you're in trouble, because then you're ideologically captured, potentially.
You're stuck.
Yeah.
Don't progress.
Well, the dogma allows you to play the game of communicating to get to the truth. So if I'm a critical rationalist scientist and we're both playing that game, we can get to a truth claim. But if I'm a really pious Christian, we can talk in that lens too. So dogma is useful. It's useful to be ideologically captured, but also to just be a little bit loose on information as new information comes in.
Right.
Because you can get to the truth claim through the same,
very true,
through different lenses.
Very cool.
I don't know if I answered that at all.
No, it's fine.
Honestly,
I just wanted to get your story.
Question.
Yeah, that was
a huge
a good question.
Sorry.
Yeah, but I can say this: there's nothing. I'll end with this. If you tell the truth and you do
nothing
things
but the truth.
with nothing
Sorry.
but it's true. My mom always told me this. She said, if you just act like the truth is like a sword, it just cuts. And I've been into some pretty bad scenarios where like I've taken on risk doing files, like where I'm actually personally at risk, both physically, but also like legally. And I've done them because I'm like, well, it's the right thing to do. I've thought about it a lot, and I'm just going to tell the truth. And that cuts like in ways you don't expect. I've never been betrayed by that ever in the most extreme scenarios, where I'm also being attacked from like the legalistic point of view, even though it might seem convenient to not do that.
Yeah.
Truth always prevails.
Yeah. So it's like, again, it's structurally, it's like you aim for the highest good. You believe that the world's cooked in your favor, that it's good. It's a irrational or rational optimism. I use that word specifically. And then your guiding rails are honesty, integrity. Honesty, you say what you think. Integrity is you do what you're obligated to do, and then courage latches those together.
I feel like that's like just worldwide. Like no religion, no nothing should separate that. Like that should just be human moral code.
It's core values that at least for me, it's battle tested for me now. I've been to like some bad places personally, and both in like my work context. I purposely seek out the hardest files. When I see it, if it makes sense to do it, I'll literally chew through it because I got a good family behind me.
Love that.
Got my little finance thing going on. You know, I'm not brave in all scenarios, but sometimes I'm willing to put all the chips on the table if it maneuvers, and I got stories to kind of support that. And often I feel like inspired to do it. I feel locked in, and then as long as I just hold those two things steady, the outcome is always good. It's crazy, but I don't believe it in the moment. I'm like, I'm in trouble. Like
Seriously.
One time I broke up a sex offender ring. 13 girls were being abused in a small community. It's a long story. One of the girls unfortunately killed herself.
Gosh.
Yeah, it's really heavy. Okay. In the grocery store of the small community, the family that was facilitating the crimes blackmailed me to the whole community. It's a small insular groupie. They were a well-known family. And in the grocery store, a third-party person threw fruit at me. That's the level of animosity I was getting because it's a small-town cop, right? The police station itself was kind of like, oh, this is too hot for us. Not the police as an organization, but like my boss, person who ran it, was kind of like, oh, this is someone I know. Like, what are you doing? Okay, so everything said don't do it, but I was like, I'm gonna do this because I'm obligated to, and I just held the line, and it worked out nicely, and I arrested that guy, and those girls are fine.
Amazing.
Okay, I got like 10 examples like that.
Wow.
And now I'm looking for it. I just wait. I go, oh, where's this? Oh, there's a scenario where I can apply, and it can be anything. It doesn't be police work, just whatever, like helping someone out, life. Yeah. And I go, there it is. I hear that little twist in my head going, that's the path, and I just shoot for it. But I'm brutally honest with myself the whole way through, and I'm just obligated to do it because the vision
may get
good.
in trouble. You may.
Yeah, but
hey, you got
the
God
right thing
behind
and
you.
it works, and it happens when you're getting attacked too. Just tell the truth. Honestly, it has never failed me, and I wouldn't have said that even like a couple years ago. I'd been like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's it. But now I'm like, oh, it's battle tested. On all scenarios. Yeah.
So moral of the story, kids, don't lie. Always tell the truth.
Always.
Yeah.
Truth always comes out.
And it's hard to do that. There's a courage element to that.
Yeah.
And I'm not perfect. I mess up all the time. But sometimes it's worked out well.
So you're truthful. You're a truthful man.
Thank you for all your services, Fraser.
No, thank you for having me on here.
Yeah, it was a great talk. We had so much fun. I learned so much.
Yeah, like this could have been longer, but
I know,
right?
I'm kind of like, I wonder if we can extend. Just kidding.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on here. You've made me feel very welcome in Dubai. So I'm liking it so far.
Yes.
So how do you like Dubai so far?
It's good. I'm so new though. Ask me like in a month, you know. But I like it so far. It's super interesting. But I like the heat though. It's good.
Yeah.
I was in Singapore.
Coming from Canada. Singapore. Yeah.
Singapore's humid, right? You sweat like crazy. But here's a bit more dry.
It's hot.
No, it's hot and humid. Just wait. It hasn't even hit yet. Just wait. Yeah.
I'm in the new phase. Everything's good.
No, but that's fun. Enjoy it. If you could speak directly to a younger version of yourself, just entering the field or just life in general, what would you say?
It depends on your context. I grew up in a very nice, privileged situation. My childhood was
you had a nice
perfect,
childhood.
right? Everything was good. So if you're in a scenario where you just got to make things work, it's different. But I would say to myself, if I was coming out at 18 or whatever, it's the same thing I just mentioned before. Do everything to keep your conscience clean and your soul intact. Fundamentally, that's it. Right. And that's following your intuition. So let your intuition guide you, the vision, not the words. What you just kind of see, let that, as long as you have the resources to pursue this, then just pursue that as a direction and let your conscious mind just be your sober second thought. So follow your intuition unrelentlessly because the outcome's out of your control. And if you're feeble on that, you'll get burnt. The people who are risk adverse get burnt just as much as the people who take on risk. That'd be my advice.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you guys for watching another episode of Hachi with us. And we'll catch you guys next time.
Later.
Bye.
That's the sound of the pulley. Woo, woo. That's the sound of the pulley.
That was amazing.